Welcome to today's deep dive into a group of hoofed animals that you've probably seen in a pasture or a petting zoo. But there's far more to them than wool and bleating. Today, we're talking about sheep and their wild relatives, part of the fascinating and diverse group known as Caprinae. From the icy tundra of the Arctic to the craggy cliffs of the Himalayas, these animals have adapted to some of the harshest environments on Earth. And at the heart of their survival, one of the most complex digestive systems in the animal kingdom. If you'd like to learn more, check out the document in the description with research papers and image credits. Sheep belong to the order Artiodactyla, the even-toed ungulates. I won't go deep into this order today since I've covered it in other videos, like giraffes, four-horned antelopes, or even whales, so check out those if you're interested in the broader picture. Today's focus is on Bovidae, the largest family within Artiodactyla. Bovids are part of a group called Ruminants, which include not just cattle, sheep and goats, but also deer, pronghorn, musk deer, chevrotains and giraffes. Ruminants are remarkable for their digestive systems, evolved to break down tough plant material. Unlike most herbivores, they've developed multi-chambered stomachs, microbial fermentation, and a process you might know as chewing the cud. Take cows, for example. They graze on grass, chew briefly to mix in saliva, and then swallow. The food enters the rumen, the first and largest stomach chamber, where microbes begin fermentation. It then moves to the next chamber, the reticulum, which filters out larger chunks and sends them back to the mouth for further chewing. This regurgitated food is what we call cud. Chewing is critical. It breaks down plant fibers and generates more saliva, which helps regulate digestion. After that, the food passes to the omasum, where water and nutrients are absorbed. Finally, it passes to the abomasum, the true stomach, where acidic digestion finishes the job. As you can see, ruminant digestion is an elegant solution to a very tough problem. Now, let's zoom in on Bovidae, a family of around 143 living species, ranging from giants like the gao, which can stand over 2.2 meters or 7 feet tall at the shoulder, to the tiny royal antelope, just 25 centimeters or 10 inches tall. Bovids are obligate herbivores, and it's not just their stomachs that show it. They lack upper front teeth, instead having a hard pad and relying on strong back teeth to grind their food. A hallmark of bovids is their horns. All wild male bovids have them, and many females do too. They're permanent, unbranched, and made of a bony core covered in keratin, unlike deer antlers, which are seasonal and branched. Bovid horns vary widely in shape, straight, spiraled, curved, and play roles in defense and displays. Bovids also vary in how they move, from fast-running antelopes to sure-footed goats. Many are social, forming herds for safety and competition. In some, including sheep, this leads to striking sexual dimorphism, especially in horn size and behavior. Now to Caprinae, the subfamily that includes sheep, goats, and their lesser-known relatives. These animals are often tough, adaptable species, built for life in harsh environments. Steep mountains, freezing tundra, or dry rock deserts. Many survive where food is scarce, temperatures drop, and predators loom. Caprinae is traditionally divided into 3 tribes. The smallest is Panthalopini, with a single species, the Tibetan antelope, Panthalops hodgsoni. It's a high-altitude specialist, with unique hemoglobin to cope with low oxygen and dense underfur to survive the cold. Next is Ovibovini, with the muskox, gorals, and serows. Short-legged, shaggy animals that live in rugged forested mountains. They are more heavily built and often live in colder regions. The muskox, for instance, is one of just 7 fully terrestrial mammals that live on Greenland. Finally, there's Caprini, the largest tribe, which includes sheep and goats. It contains about 10 genera and over 25 species. Sheep, Ovis, are actually the most basal genus in this group, the evolutionary starting point. Many species in Caprinae are sometimes called goat antelopes, but that's just a nickname, not a scientific group. In fact, to group all the goat antelopes together, you'd have to include nearly all of Caprinae. Only the Tibetan antelope would be excluded. Let's walk through the Caprini tribe, starting with the sheep and working our way through some of their more surprising relatives. First up is Ovis, the sheep, which turns out to be the most ancient branch of the group. They're most closely related to the Nilgiri tahr, a stocky goat-like species found in southern India. Next come the chamois, or rupicapra, agile mountain animals from Europe with distinctive pale faces and dark eye stripes. They form a clade with two unusual relatives, the mountain goat, Oriamnos, native to North America, and the tarkan, Budorcus, a large and shaggy grazer from the Himalayas. The next branch includes the Barbary sheep and the Arabian tahr, two species whose names are a bit misleading. The Barbary sheep isn't actually a true sheep, and the Arabian tahr belongs to a genus completely separate from the other tahr species. In fact, none of the three tahrs are each other's closest relatives, despite sharing a name. After that comes the Baral, or blue sheep, which resembles a sheep but has the agility and climbing ability of a goat, a true mountain hybrid in form and function. The Himalayan tahr, Hemitragus, is next. Males are known for their thick, flowing manes and their adaptations for life on high, rocky slopes. Finally, we arrive at Capra, the largest genus in the group, with wild goats, ibexes and spiral-horned macaw, and the familiar domestic goat. With 9 wild species plus the domesticated form, this genus carries the most diversity within Caprini. As you may have noticed, most of the genera in Caprini only contain a single species. These monotypic lineages reflect how specialized many of these animals have become, each adapted to a very specific niche or environment. But there are 2 big exceptions, Capra and Ovis, and since sheep are the focus of today's video, let's take a closer look at what makes them special. The genus Ovis includes all the wild sheep, and domestic sheep, which we'll revisit later. Domestic sheep differ greatly from their wild relatives due to thousands of years of selective breeding. There are about 6 or 7 wild species across Eurasia and North America. These medium to large animals often have thick coats, broad hooves, and are surprisingly agile, especially in mountainous terrain. A key feature is their horns. Both sexes usually have them, but rams take it to another level. A mature bighorn sheep's horns weighs over 14 kilograms or 31 pounds. That's more than the rest of its entire skeleton. Rams use their horns in intense clashes to compete for mates. Though violent looking, their reinforced skulls absorb shocks, and the horns act as shock absorbers rather than weapons. Wild sheep are shaped by their environment, adapted to steep, rocky habitats where predators struggle. Their sure-footedness, combined with excellent peripheral vision, makes them hard to surprise, and even harder to catch. Let's start with the snow sheep, Ovis nivicola. It's a fitting beginning, not just because the snow sheep represents one of the earliest branches in the sheep family tree, but because it played a key role in the group's evolutionary history. Snow sheep appeared around 600,000 years ago, during the Pleistocene. This coincides with the formation of the Bering Land Bridge, connecting Siberia to Alaska. Some early snow sheep used this to cross into North America, a journey that eventually led to the evolution of their North American cousins, the Dall and Bighorn sheep. Also known as the Siberian bighorn, modern snow sheep inhabit large areas of eastern Russia, especially Siberia. Rams stand up to 1 meter or 3 feet at the shoulder, with thick coats to endure freezing temperatures. Their horns are one of their most distinctive features. Males grow massive spiraling horns that rival those of the American bighorn. Females also have horns, but these are much smaller and more slender. They live in rugged alpine terrain, rocky slopes and mountain ridges, and their distribution is highly fragmented. In fact, there may be as many as 7 recognized subspecies, each found in an isolated pocket of habitat. That's because their mountain environment acts like an archipelago. The sheep can't easily move between ranges, so populations are separated by valleys and lowlands. Over time, this isolation has driven subspecies formation, and could, eventually, lead to entirely new species. They range from forest edges up to 2,000 meters or 7,000 feet. Winters are brutal, with temperatures dropping as low as -60 degrees Celsius or -76 Fahrenheit. To cope, some migrate 80 to 120 kilometers or 50 to 70 miles to wintering grounds on the southern or eastern slopes of mountains, where the conditions are slightly less severe. Their diet includes whatever plant material they can find: grasses, sedges, lichens, mosses, shrubs, and even mushrooms. Snow sheep breed in the late autumn or early winter, just before the migration. This ensures lambs are born in the spring, but survival is tough. As many as 50% may not make it through their first year due to the extreme climate. Despite these challenges, snow sheep are currently listed as least concern by the IUCN, with about 90,000 individuals. Still, slow reproduction and high infant mortality make them vulnerable to overhunting and climate change, which threatens their cold habitats. For now, though, snow sheep remain remarkably resilient, a hardy survivor from an ancient lineage. Next is the Dall sheep, Ovis dalli, one of the two North American species that evolved from the snow sheep. Of the two, the Dall sheep remains more closely tied to its alpine origins, retaining many features of its Siberian ancestors. Today, Dall sheep are found across Alaska and northwestern Canada, occupying some of the continent's most remote, rugged terrain: steep cliffs, windswept ridges, and rocky alpine meadows. They're known for their striking appearance, with pure white coats, blending almost perfectly into snowy cliffs and ridgelines, making them one of the few wild sheep with a completely white coat. This trait defines the Ovis dalli subspecies. In contrast, the other subspecies, the stone sheep, has a slate grey or mottled coat. Where the two forms meet, some populations mix, leading to debate about whether they should be treated as separate subspecies or just colour morphs. Similar in size to snow sheep, dalls inhabit even more extreme terrain, with sheer cliffs and narrow ridges that demand exceptional agility. They are almost entirely restricted to alpine habitats, ranging from 1,200 to 2,000 metres or 4,000 to 6,500 feet. This lifestyle shapes much of their behaviour. They use speed and nimbleness to escape predators, sticking to steep, inaccessible areas. Still, winters are long and unforgiving, and they must rely on a tough, fibrous diet of grasses, sedges, mosses, and lichens. Socially, males and females form separate groups outside the breeding season, with rams and bachelor herds. During the autumn rut, these groups come together, and males engage in dramatic head-to-head battles. Iconic displays where massive spiralling horns crash together with a thunderous crack. Lambing occurs in spring, and while survival rates are generally better than in snow sheep, young animals still face high mortality. The IUCN lists them as least concern, with over 100,000 individuals. Still, there are localised concerns, especially habitat fragmentation from roads and development, and disease transmission from domestic livestock. Climate change may also shift alpine vegetation zones and snow patterns, potentially shrinking the cold, high-altitude refuges these animals depend on. The Bighorn sheep, Ovis canadensis, is the other North American species descended from ancient Siberian ancestors. While Dall stayed north, the Bighorn moved south and adapted to a broader range of environments. Today, Bighorn sheep range across the western United States, southwestern Canada, and northern Mexico. Unlike the white dalls, Bighorns have warm, dusty brown coats that blend in with the canyons, cliffs, and deserts of their surroundings. They're perhaps the best-known wild sheep in North America, and the most iconic, especially in the US Southwest. The species gets its name from the immense horns of the males, which form massive spirals that can weigh up to 14 kilograms or 30 pounds. These horns are not just for show. During the autumn rut, rams engage in violent clashes, charging at each other at speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour or 20 miles per hour. These head-to-head impacts are among the most forceful in the animal kingdom, and rams may battle for hours before one backs down. As in other sheep, females also have horns, but they're shorter and more slender. Bighorns are remarkably adaptable. While they prefer steep, rugged terrain, from alpine slopes to desert mountains, some populations live at surprisingly low elevations. They are divided into three subspecies: the Rocky Mountain bighorn, the Sierra Nevada bighorn, and the desert bighorn, with the latter showing especially dramatic adaptations to arid conditions. Desert bighorns can survive for extended periods without drinking, relying instead on moisture from plants and dew, and they often time their movements to coincide with seasonal rainfall. Though globally least concerned, bighorns suffered steep declines in the 19th and 20th centuries due to overhunting, habitat fragmentation, and disease, especially pneumonia, introduced from domestic sheep. Some herds were completely wiped out, and others were severely endangered. While the species has always been rated least concern, many regional populations were considered at high risk, and some remain endangered to this day. The recovery of bighorn sheep has been a major North American conservation success. Reintroduction programs have returned bighorns to former habitats in Colorado, California, and Nevada. Wildlife agencies actively manage disease risk, including testing domestic sheep grazing near bighorn ranges, and in some areas, separating the two with fencing or buffer zones. These efforts have helped many populations recover, though some, like the Sierra Nevada bighorn, remain endangered and require ongoing protection. Today, bighorn sheep are a conservation success story in progress. Their presence in the cliffs above desert highways or among alpine crags is a reminder both of their resilience and the ongoing work needed to preserve these wild icons of the American West. As we move away from the snow sheep lineage, we reach the other major clade of sheep, a group that evolved entirely within Eurasia. Leading this group is the Argali, Ovis ammon, the largest of all wild sheep and one of the most iconic mountain ungulates. Standing up to 1.2 meters or 4 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 180 kilograms or 400 pounds in males, Argali are imposing animals. Their most distinctive feature is their massive horns. Mature rams can grow spiraling horns up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet along the curve, some of the most dramatic in the animal kingdom. Argali inhabit vast remote mountain landscapes across Central Asia, in some of the most breathtaking vistas on Earth. Their range stretches from the craggy mountain ranges of Kazakhstan to the vast expanses of Mongolia and the Tibetan Plateau. These open, high-altitude environments offer challenges: thin air, harsh winters, and sparse vegetation, but also advantages, like few predators and excellent visibility. Like other wild sheep, Argali rely on keen eyesight and agility to evade danger, though their bulk makes them less nimble than other species. Argali are primarily grazers, feeding on grasses, sedges, and herbs. Their diet shifts with the seasons, and in winter they often descend to lower elevations in search of food, a critical survival strategy when snow blankets the uplands for months. Despite their size and range, Argali face significant threats. Listed as near threatened by the IUCN, their numbers are declining due to habitat degradation, overhunting, and competition with domestic livestock. Poaching, especially for their massive horns, has heavily impacted mature males, skewing the sex ratio in some populations. Yet, conservation efforts are underway. In Mongolia and elsewhere, community-based programs incentivize locals to protect Argali, often using tightly regulated trophy hunting. While controversial, when carefully managed, these programs can help fund habitat protection, scientific monitoring, and anti-poaching patrols, while giving local communities a reason to support conservation. Still, the situation varies widely by region. Some subspecies, such as the Marco Polo sheep, are better protected and relatively stable. Others are far more vulnerable. Ongoing conservation is essential to protect both the species and the wild landscapes they represent. The Argali is a symbol of Central Asia's high mountains, a reminder of the grandeur and fragility of remote wilderness. The Urial, Ovis vignei, is a smaller, more lightly built species of wild sheep, adapted to the lowland hills and semi-arid landscapes of South and Central Asia, a sharp contrast to the alpine Argali or cliff-dwelling bighorn. Their range spans from Iran to Kazakhstan, through Pakistan and into India, typically between 500 to 3,000 meters in elevation. Unlike most other wild sheep, Urials are not alpine specialists. Instead, they've evolved to live in warmer, drier environments, trading rugged peaks for rolling hills and rocky outcrops. Urials are recognizable by their reddish-brown coats and, in some subspecies, a dark ruff on the neck. Rams bear large, outward curling horns, not as massive as those of Argali or bighorns, but still impressive. At 40 to 90 kilograms or 90 to 200 pounds, Urials are smaller than other sheep, but they are nimble, relying on their speed to evade predators. The taxonomy of Urials is complex. Several subspecies are recognized, but the boundaries between them are often blurred by hybrid zones, both genetically and geographically. Some scientists have even proposed splitting certain populations off as distinct species, so the subject remains debated. The Urial is listed as vulnerable by the IUCN, though threats vary by region as some local populations are far more at risk. Habitat loss from agriculture and infrastructure is a growing problem, especially in populated areas like northern Pakistan. Poaching is also a major concern in areas where enforcement is weak. Still, there are some conservation successes. Protected areas in Iran, Pakistan and Kazakhstan have safeguarded key populations. Community-based programs and regulated trophy hunting, when well managed, have provided funding and local support for protection. Though less well known than their alpine relatives, Urials play an important ecological and cultural role in the landscapes they inhabit. Their story reflects adaptations not to extreme altitude, but to the pressures of human-dominated foothills, offering a different lens on survival in a changing world. The mouflon, Ovis gmelini, may be the most historically significant wild sheep, not for its size or range, but because it's considered the primary ancestor of domestic sheep. Once widespread from Anatolia and the Caucasus to Iran and parts of Central Asia, wild mouflon now persist in scattered populations, mainly in Armenia, eastern Turkey and Iran. They inhabit semi-open rocky landscapes between 1,000 to 2,500 metres in elevation. Mouflon are the smallest wild sheep. Rams stand around 70 to 90 centimetres or 28 to 35 inches at the shoulder, and weigh 40 to 60 kilograms or 90 to 130 pounds. Males are striking animals with tight, rounded horns and a distinctive reddish-brown coat, often marked by a white saddle patch. Their smaller stature and more compact horns set them apart visually from their high mountain relatives like Argali or Bighorns. The mouflon's importance is in its role in domestication. Genetic evidence points to Asiatic mouflon as the primary ancestor of modern domestic sheep, likely through a process that began over 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. Some populations introduced to islands like Corsica and Sardinia by early farmers later went feral, becoming the so-called European mouflon. These animals closely resemble Asiatic mouflon, but are genetically descended from early domestic sheep. This relationship makes their place on a phylogenetic tree especially interesting, with European mouflon nested within the domestic lineage rather than alongside their wild relatives. As a result, it could be argued either that the European mouflon should be a distinct species, or domestic sheep are better classified as a subspecies of mouflon. Either way, the current classifications don't quite align with what we now know about their evolutionary history. Mouflon are considered vulnerable by the IUCN. Their wild populations are fragmented and declining due to habitat loss, hunting and hybridization with domestic or feral sheep. Genetic mixing with domestic breeds in particular threatens to dilute their genetics. Protected areas in Armenia, Iran and Turkey offer refuge, and some conservation efforts focus on preventing hybridization. Their connection to domestic sheep also makes them valuable for understanding the domestication process, making their preservation not only a matter of biodiversity, but also of historical and scientific value. Modest in stature, but central to human history, the mouflon is a quiet cornerstone in the story of wild sheep. The domestic sheep, Ovis aries, is the most widespread and familiar member of the genus, shaped not by nature but by thousands of years of human selection. Descended from the Asiatic mouflon, domestic sheep have been transformed into one of the world's most important livestock species. Today, they exist in hundreds of breeds, many bearing little resemblance to their wild ancestors, with woolly coats, smaller or absent horns, and reduced natural instincts. Their significance to people is immense, providing wool for warmth, meat for food, and milk for dairy products across diverse cultures and environments. Although not a conservation concern themselves, domestic sheep significantly affect wild Ovis species. Disease transmission, especially pneumonia, is a major threat, as is competition for grazing. In some areas, hybridization with feral or free-roaming domestic sheep threatens the genetic integrity of wild populations. Domestic and feral sheep can also affect wider ecosystems through overgrazing, soil erosion, and competition with native herbivores, making their management important not only for wild sheep, but for maintaining the health of the broader landscape. Conservation efforts often include disease monitoring, grazing restrictions, and buffer zones, all critical for maintaining healthy landscapes and protecting wild sheep. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of sheep. from the icy ridges of Siberia to the high peaks of North America and the sweeping plateaus of Central Asia. These animals are a remarkable example of adaptation, diversity, and resilience. Their story is one of both wilderness and domestication, shaped by evolution in remote mountains and by millennia of human influence. Whether clinging to cliffs, crossing deserts, or living alongside us as livestock, sheep play vital roles in ecosystems and cultures alike. And their story reminds us just how much biodiversity there is still to discover and protect. So, if this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. The more people who know about animals like sheep, the better chance we'll have to ensure they're still here for generations to come. Thanks for watching. If there's another fascinating species you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments below.